Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. In recent months, the UK has seen 3 alleged terrorist attacks. It's a difficult task to get your hands on reliable evidence with regards to these events, especially bearing in mind that mainstream media have a track record of fabricating their narrative and ignoring the best evidence. Here to talk about these events and his latest book is Dr. Nick Kollerstrom. Welcome, Nick.
Pleasure to be back here, Richard.
Okay, then we are going to come on to your book, which is entitled A European Perspective, Chronicles of False Flag Terrorism. So you focused just on Europe with this book, a little bit on 9/11, but mainly European cases over the last...
That's right, Richard. There are so many books about state terror in America and 9/11 truth and so on, and there's virtually nothing about Europe, what's happening in Europe as such. And I want to create a discourse whereby the different European nations can talk to each other about the way in which fictional, fabricated, phony terror has been perpetrated by unknown international agents in order to destroy freedom and democracy and promote absolute authoritarian government and fear, get everyone living in a state of fear.
Okay. Now, as I said, 3 alleged terrorist attacks in the UK this year, and every time one pops up, I kind of sigh because I think, oh no, I've got to try and get to the bottom of this one, now another one, and then another one. Because the amount of work involved, if you are going to unpick them and get closer to the truth, is a great deal of work, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah, as I say, every state fabricated terror event is an intelligence test to the population. Are you really dumb enough to believe this? And if you are, your life will get worse. For example, right after the Manchester one, we get armed police and military on the streets. That's the latest development.
Well, let me just play devil's advocate then, Nick, because I read a lot of comments on the internet and that kind of thing where they will come back at people like you and say things like, oh, well, you just put them all down to that. They're not all conspiracies. Don't be ridiculous. This one's just as it was described in the media. How can you possibly just immediately claim they are all fabricated or false?
Yeah, I'd say all the big ones, the big mega events, which immediately have media reporting, media telling you who did it the very same day, practically. Those are the arranged, orchestrated events.
So why are you saying that?
There are sort of small scale.
Let me just interrupt. Sorry, Nick, but let me interrupt because people will get frustrated at you making that claim. Why? Just because it's reported quickly in the media? Is this not just fast media reporting?
Well, that's before the police have had any time to investigate it. We used to have a police force that investigate and look for clues about who might be guilty. And that took a while. And they didn't report who had done it until they'd done that. And now we get trial by media. You get terrific media announcement of who did it, the wicked, evil terrorist. You can't have a court case because the whole thing has been tried and judged in the media immediately after. Yeah,
that is something about the 2 cases that we're going to talk about first, Westminster Bridge and Manchester. The perpetrator's dead, so it means you only get an inquest. And my experience of inquests is there's no real evidence presented. The coroner just reads out a narrative and we're expected to believe it. So there's no trial, there's no testing of any evidence.
And there weren't even any grieving families, the Manchester coroner's event. Not a single grieving family.
So what the legal profession presents after these events occur is an inquest, which is, I would say, a completely flawed way of presenting evidence because there's not 2 sides contesting that evidence.
No, an inquest isn't supposed to be judging who is guilty. It's just looking at the cause of death. That's what it's supposed to do.
Right. So we're left with a wholly inadequate mainstream media, which gives us information, and then I guess we're expected to go to the scene and investigate ourselves. You see, this is the problem for me, is that I would state that at this point in time, I have no opinion on Westminster or Manchester other than I don't trust the mainstream media and I wouldn't trust an inquest. That's my only opinion at this point in time.
Fair enough,
because
Richard.
I haven't done a personal investigation. Now, I have raised an appeal for witnesses focusing on the Manchester event because, as we're going to discuss, a large amount of people were allegedly injured or killed. So
Yeah.
there must be a huge number of witnesses. And I would imagine it should be fairly easy to get to speak to at least some of those witnesses. So that's why I focused on that event.
Fair enough.
We'll come on to that.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So please don't email me. I'm not prejudging these events. Nick's got his own opinions on them. I need evidence. And if you know anybody who was a first-hand witness, I'm not interested in second-hand witnesses, first-hand witnesses from any of these attacks, but specifically the Manchester event, I'd like to hear from them, because the information I've had so far really is backing up what Nick is going to tell you.
Yeah. Can I say that one of the first things you notice about these kind of events is the funny numbers, which keeps turning up. Manchester, you got a 22-year-old killing 22 people on the 22nd, and that 22nd event is exactly 3 months after the Westminster Bridge, which is on the 22nd, and it was anniversary, get this, of the Lee Rigby event, 4 years later. So you always feel that funny numbers are playing, and not only 22 dead, but 119 injured, which is the 9/11 signature. Okay, so you get Manchester 9/11 injured, 22 dead, and you're just aware that funny number games are being played.
He's aged 22. We've got London was on the 22nd, Westminster, Munich 22nd, Brussels 22nd. Well, there was a Glasgow event. I'm not sure if you've included that one though. On the 22nd of the 12th, 15.
Right.
I think that might have been the bin lorry thing.
That's right. Yeah. Norway, right. The 22nd.
So okay. So now some people would look at the numerology and just write it off as a coincidence. So there's the two schools of thought. It's a coincidence, or they've been planned and done that way deliberately because they're celebrating certain dates. Because the number 777 seems to come up a lot as well.
7/7. Yeah. Well, that starts with the 9/11 event, which is like the archetypal fabricated event starting off our new millennium, where the planes were AA 77 and 11, the two American Airlines planes.
So let me just ask you then, Nick. Let's just go down the premise that whoever's organising these events is organising them on dates to follow certain numerology.
Yeah.
Are they doing it just to take the piss and have a bit of fun, or is it some darker occult meaning in it?
Well, I suspect the latter, but we'll never know what it is. You know, so I don't want to go too far on funny numbers. Right. You can never predict anything. Nobody who gets into this numerology, I would say, it can never predict anything on the basis of that.
Right, right. All right. Well, we're going to discuss the Westminster briefly, then Manchester, and then we're going to take a look at Nick's book, which looks at many what he claims are false flag terrorist events since 1992 up to the present day in Europe. Right, and there's been a lot. Okay, so I'll put this graphic up on the screen, which just shows the layout of Westminster and the various things that happened. So just run us through the sequence of events very briefly as the official story of what's alleged to have happened.
Okay, so this is around the spring equinox. 2 days before, you'd have a terrific drill going on underneath the Westminster Bridge, and then of people being shot and so on. And then you get this event on the 22nd, so it's around the spring equinox, and it's the anniversary of what happened in Brussels a year before, which also, Brussels Airport, which is also the spring equinox, and that also had a big London drill a couple of days before. So these events are echoing each other in time, and you get the story of a mad driver who drives along Westminster Bridge. The fiendish fellow goes up onto the pavement, drives along on the pavement, mowing down all these helpless civilians, and then, wham, he goes into the side of the railings of Westminster House of Parliament, and then, so the whole front of the car is crumpled up. This might remind you of the Lee Rigby story. And then, undeterred, he leaps out with 2 knives. And this is, you know, a crowded day, and he then rushes along, rushes around the corner. This is one of those crowded places in London, and heavily policed. And he then goes into the House of Commons. Now, the idea that you can go in, I assure you, anyone who's been around the House of Commons, it's heavily policed. There's no way anyone can just go in. And then he starts stabbing a police officer. Poor fellow dies, and he is then shot. And that basically is the end of the drama.
Right. Now, I've covered the anomalies with the alleged perpetrator, Abu Izzadeen. He was the initial alleged perpetrator, who was then replaced by this guy, Khalid Massoud.
Khalid Massoud, right.
So I've actually gone through that. I'll put a link on the screen. You can watch the explanation of the anomalies with regards to that.
Yeah.
So do you want to make a quick comment on the fact that it looks like they've cocked up there with the actual perpetrator?
Yeah, well, this is a very important key to what happened. They gave an image of this guy who was still alive. He'd been shot several bullets. There he was, still alive, lying on a stretcher with an ambulance next to him. So they'd called an ambulance from the nearby St Thomas Hospital. There was no drop of blood anywhere. He must have waited 5 minutes for an ambulance, no drop of blood. There were 2 knives on the cobblestones not far from him, neither with any drop of blood on it. And that was the one picture was shown. Then that, as you point out, was similar to this fellow, the hate preacher from Hackney. And that went wrong because his brother then turned up and said, oh no, he's still in jail. So suddenly there was a flurry of activity, and the police or security agents went up to Birmingham and kicked in the door of Khalid Massoud, who's an English teacher, 52 years old, and with a family man, and the next day it was announced that he'd done it. Okay, so he was then the villain. He then gets demonised, and I would say that is the one real death you've got in this whole saga. Right. He has to be bumped off. He has to be dead before he gets given the blame.
All right, that's pretty controversial, especially in relation to the police officer that was allegedly killed. Some people would say disrespectful. How do you reply to that?
Okay. You see, you don't see any face or image of the police officer as he's being killed. You see a big crowd of people around him. I mean, I may be wrong. He may have been killed, but you see a big crowd around him as he's allegedly dying. When you see his corpse, it's such that you can't see any face, which is kind of unusual. So I think we're entitled to be doubtful about that.
Right. So what you're saying is...
and also, sorry, let me just say, this MP was then given credit as a hero for trying to massage him, right? Yep, sure. The MP Tobias Elwood was then cast as a hero role for doing this pumping of the chest, trying to revive the heart of this police officer. Now, you really don't do that if someone's been shot in the chest. And there are a whole lot of qualified medical personnel standing around while he was doing this. Right. Now, medical personnel wouldn't stand around, let an MP do totally the wrong thing.
Can I just read this, Nick? Right, this is someone who's countered that argument. So
Right,
let me just read this out.
Yeah.
Hi, Rich. I've just watched Nick Kollerstrom with his views on the Westminster attack. Let me assure you, it was 100% real. As a state-registered paramedic, I personally know many of the ambulance staff on scene, as seen in the press and TV news reports.
Right.
By the way, I have asked this chap if he can ask any of them to do any interviews with me or make statements, and I've had nothing back from that, right? Yeah. So there's no first-hand account, right? CPR was being done on the PC as a stopped heart takes a higher priority over a stab wound. It's that simple. Any CPR being done on a patient is better than no CPR. We let bystanders do CPR while we get kit out of various response bags. It don't just magically appear on the floor. It has to be opened, switched on, prepared. This takes a few seconds. So anyone on scene, CPR, we let them continue until we're ready to take the clinical lead over. Also, the perpetrator would be treated no different as we treat everyone the same. Hope this helps.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, let's leave it open, Richard.
Right.
That we've got a qualified person here saying they think he really died.
Right.
I mean, I think we're entitled to doubt this. And when I first reported this event, I was told it was real, and I reported it as real. And you can hear the first debates I did. I was saying I thought people had really died on this event and were really in hospital, okay? And then more and more evidence came in, and the main thing that sways me is that all the way down Westminster Bridge, you get different types of dummies, rubber dummies, in various anatomically impossible positions. And people hanging over them or hovering over them who are looking like actors. I think the whole thing looks like crisis actors and dummies all the way across Westminster Bridge.
I wouldn't state that you're wrong, Nick. I would state that it's, unless you can go and touch that dummy or person, you don't really know until you've examined it. So because other people let me put it this way: other people who've looked at the images say they're not dummies, they're bodies. So it's a matter of opinion rather than.
It is indeed. I mean, let's take the Aish afraid, which some people think is like, are you afraid? Her bum is sticking out from the back underneath the bus. Now, this is one of the first reported deaths. Initial RT reporting the event says there's 2 deaths. One is the policeman, and the other is this woman under the bus. So that absurd image of legs with black tights on, right, no shoes, all the shoes are taken off of these dead people and put beside them, no shoes, that image of someone in black tights protruding from the back of a bus as if 2 huge wheels of the bus have gone over her and her bum is quite undamaged, that I would say has to be a dummy. You can't have a human body without any bones broken, looking quite unsquashed. It would have blood all over the place if a real bus had gone over that. Now, I agree with you. Some people say that's real. That's a real person. And it is a matter of judgment, and I'll let viewers judge themselves if they think that can be real. You don't get any medical personnel coming. If it was a real body, they would have pulled her out, or they would have moved the bus on, for God's sake, in order to have a look at that body, pull it out, put it on the stretcher. That doesn't happen. The bus is not moved on. The bus is just emptied. You see an empty bus, right? Where's everybody gone? Empty bus with this, that's just a stage prop, a rubber dummy put underneath the back wheel. And you see later pictures, all they've done, they put a sheet over that dummy. That's all they do. That's in the drama, all that happens.
You mentioned missing footwear, and you actually think that this is some symbolic or occultic thing where they've got 1 shoe or 1 sock missing, this sort of thing?
It's very prominent throughout this. The various dummies you see have had shoes taken off or socks taken off, like Khalid Masood lying on his stretcher. You see him with 1 shoe or sock taken off. And people surmise, is this Masonic? This is, after all, the 300 year of the birth of the Freemasons. And you get this rather dramatic and quite absurd bright red Freemason helicopter descending on the grass right in front of the House of Parliament 10 minutes after the event. You see the time from Big Ben.
I mean, one comment I would make to something like that is, has that just been put in there to give the conspiracy theorists something to talk about? I.e., we're going to have another audience to this event, i.e. conspiracy people, so let's give them something to be excited about. Do you see what I'm saying? It might be they're actually taking the piss with this rather than it being some serious, oh yes, we've got to use a Freemasonic helicopter. Do you know what I mean? A form of baiting, if you like. But let me read out some viewers' comments, Nick, and Nick, you can respond to them. Now, firstly, a comment on the Westminster Council CCTV cameras in London were axed in some months in June 2016, and a lot of people have commented on this. And the other, hence,
why would you switch off all the CCTV when it's high security areas in London in a time of high terror alert? I mean, why would you do that? And what possible cost saving is there?
The other observation that somebody has made is that there were a number of people on the London Eye who had cameras with them, and as far as I'm aware, no footage has been released from people who were on the London Eye.
That is very crucial, Richard. What happened to all those people on the London Eye? You'd expect journalists and police to be asking them, please show us what you saw. This is so important in your view. Instead, that London Eye gets frozen for 3 hours, so everyone gets the trauma of being immobile for 3 hours on the London Eye. Then you can see them being frisked one by one by the police, and presumably taking the cameras off them as they go out. That is strong evidence for a fabricated event. I mean, I think there's quite a bit of evidence that that London buses and ambulances may have blocked off the Westminster Bridge before this thing happened, whatever did happen, so that ordinary traffic didn't go along it, and the Eye people on the Eye would have seen that.
Maybe they should rename it the London Shut Eye.
Poor.
Okay, here's another comment from a viewer. The man in the trolley who was alleged to have been shot has a white foot and a badly placed sock on the other. According to the internet, all the blood should go to the feet when just dead. It seems the guy was brought from a morgue.
Hang on, this is the alleged assassin, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, well, he wasn't dead. And I've got a witness here, somebody who was peering through the railings of the House of Commons, who saw his eyes wandering around in a quite nonchalant manner, while this was all going on. It's important that the reason the ambulance was next to him was that he was still alive. He's allegedly died in the ambulance.
This is who we suspect is Trevor Brooks.
Absolutely,
or Abu Izzadeen.
Yeah.
Okay, another viewer comments, I've noticed something even more odd. There is a white van travelling right to left on the bridge. So this is the very, very distant shot of the bridge. And there's a question mark over where that was taken. I think there are videos on the internet revealing where people think it was taken, and it's some organisation linked to the media or whatever. Anyway, there is a white van travelling right to left on the bridge as the attacker is filmed driving left to right. The white van pulls a U-turn in the middle of Westminster Bridge during a terrorist attack, then appears to follow the attacker back down towards the palace. In fact, the white van appears to be passing traffic on the bridge in the same way that the attacker's car does, which makes it appear, in my opinion, as if this white van has also mounted the pavement. Were you aware of that at all?
No, I hadn't quite seen that. Let me just fill in that the only image we've got of this car allegedly on the pavement is from a long way away, some hotel some distance along the river that photographed this. And you see a little blurred image. You can't see what moving along the bridge, and that's alleged to be the car on the pavement.
All right, here's another comment. The footage that I have showed you, this is a viewer that has sent me some footage. The footage that I have showed you has not been shown on TV, not that I have seen. If it has, it is darkened and zoomed to focus on the falling river lady, does not show the white van. So what he's saying is that what they've shown on TV is a cut down version of what he's talking about with this white van in the picture.
This is Andrea. We get these absurd stories to pull on your heartstrings. This lady Andrea comes over from Romania with her true love, and he's going to propose to her on the bridge on that day. But alas, she gets bumped off by the van and she falls over into the river and drowns. And you see a nice picture of Andrea posing the evening before, presumably. She's an evening pose. It's supposed to happen in the afternoon. That is another psyop. You get several stories of these enchanting couples who are on the bridge, and then, alas, one of them gets killed.
Right. This viewer says, if Westminster had its surveillance cameras turned off, then why did I get a traffic ticket in Conduit Street in the West End around the time of the terrorist incident in Westminster?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
All right. I don't understand why the 14-year-old in the photograph has Roundtree's chocolate-coloured skin, whilst the grown-up version of the terrorist has lighter-coloured tan. Is that usual? So this must be a photograph of Khalid Massoud as a 14-year-old, and he's got very dark skin.
Right.
Another comment, and terrorists always have to be...
May I say, with this Khalid Massoud, all his neighbours said he was a peaceful, easygoing fellow, the antithesis of a terrorist, family man, and you so often get this with the patsies who are used, that the locals cannot imagine him having any such concern or interest in politics. It doesn't make any sense to them at all, the guy they've actually known. The one trait in common is that he's known to MI5. That's the usual theme you find with these people.
And we'll come on to that as well. Terrorists always have to be shot dead so they can't be questioned, e.g. Iranian embassy siege, Lee Oswald, the Gibraltar terrorists, etc. Although I couldn't see any wound on this week's guy in today's stretcher photo. The TV news said he stayed in a hotel the night before and the same hotel the previous Friday. Was that to meet Peter Power?
Yeah, I agree we couldn't see any wound. He's supposedly been shot and you see his chest without the wounds. But I don't quite agree. The terrorists, the people working for the government, in a way, the secret state cannot kill off its own agents. It's important to appreciate this, otherwise nobody would work for them. But what is absolutely correct is that the patsy cannot speak afterwards. He's either put in jail forever, or he disappears, or he's shot dead. And the person you always want to talk to, ask what does he think he was doing, what happened, you never get to speak to them. For example, the Lee Rigby Adibalajo, he was supposedly put in jail, he's supposedly in jail now. I
mean, we were told he was given evidence via video link, I think, with that case.
Yeah. All that we can really say is that you don't ever get to talk to them. No journalist can ever speak to them.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. He started off with a gun, but only had a knife to attack the policeman. Reminded me of that attack aboard a train in France a few years ago. The perp, armed up in the toilet, if memory serves, he had an AK-47 pistol and box cutter. He left the AK-47 in the toilet, shot someone with the pistol, then it jammed. So
Yeah,
luckily, four US soldiers then overpowered him as he reached for his knife.
Yeah, I don't think this guy started off with a gun. Gunshots were heard. It's important that on the bridge, if you ask witnesses in front of Parliament Square what they heard bangs going off, and then terrific crowds started rushing away from the bridge. So I suppose gunshots are used to scare the hell out of the crowd and get them running. Okay, but what comes out in the story, in Storyland, you initially have 2 suspects reported, Reuters News, 2 suspects reported in the car, and that then goes down to one lone nut. And he comes out brandishing the 2 knives. And that obviously reminds us of the Lee Rigby story where a car is allegedly crunched up in front of a big pole and you'd expect the driver to be badly wounded, but no, he leaps out with a huge axe and starts hacking to bits, you know, allegedly. So that story of a mad car driver crashing the car apparently works. You know, journalists believe it. And so it gets reused. Then it got reused again on the more recent London Bridge story, which we won't go into.
This viewer states, how come the copper has fallen nearer to the entrance than the assailant? If Khalid Masood sought to enter the building, why did he stab the copper, then head back towards the gate, only to turn round again and run to the armed security guard?
Yeah, that's a good point. You do see the alleged policeman lying down much nearer to the gate than the guy on the stretcher, and the 2 knives are next to the guy on the stretcher.
He also states that Sky News was lying about where these 2 incidents actually happened.
Where?
He's an attached picture illustrates my concern and also conveniently shows how Sky News was lying about where these 2 incidents actually happened. Okay. This viewer says, the same modus operandi as the Melbourne car attack a couple of months ago that has been totally exposed as a fake, just as the Munich truck attack was. The same modus operandi as the Nice truck attack just before.
Very good, yes, a very good point, yeah. And may I also add that Ole Damagaard was discussing that Melbourne attack, which I haven't been into, and he used that to predict this Westminster Bridge was happened. And it's important that he intuitively was able to sense that he feels that they leave clues for you for what they're going to do next. And he did make a prediction about Westminster Bridge just coming up immediately before it happened. So I think your reader there is very right that there was an analogy of what happened in Melbourne with the car crash and then the Westminster Bridge, yeah.
Right. This same viewer states, this Westminster attack has been filmed on different days. If you look at this video with the road being wet in one and dry in the other, and different types of buses and number of buses on the bridge. Yeah,
I think there's very good points he's making. I agree that they often do that. For example, at the Manchester event, we'll come on to, that the whole thing has to be filmed, set up, rehearsed, drilled, and they then have film they can use and splice in with whatever they get to happen on the day. As you said, there's different images of the sky, what the sky looks like on the day, Westminster Bridge, and the Westminster Bridge being dry or wet. And one of the couples, Kurt, what's his name, who was knocked down the stairs at the far end of the Westminster Bridge, away from the House of Commons, and Melissa, his partner, who was knocked together with some cars selling tourist shop. She was knocked against the bridge. That all has to have been done, I think, sometime before, partly because a car mounting up the pavement couldn't get over to where they were with the tourist shop and stuff. It wouldn't be able to get that far across.
Okay.
So I think, yes, that there is film done on a previous day, yeah.
This viewer is pointing out where the car crashed into the railings, there appears to be a large piece of plywood.
Yeah.
This viewer says, where did that large piece of plywood come from? Who was carrying it around Westminster, and why is it being used to cover the stone supporting the railings?
I would suggest, I would suggest that there was a very slight indentation, or possibly none, in those railings where the car was placed. Whatever happened, we don't know what happened. And the plywood was covering up the fact that the railings were not greatly damaged. the whole of the front of the car is smashed in, okay? This again looks like theatre. There's no way the car going along closely parallel to the bridge, i.e. on the pavement, can then turn around at a sharp angle and have the momentum to hit into railings, if you catch my drift.
Right.
Hit into railings, you have to come from the other side of the road, you'd have to block off the traffic, have it drive from the other side of the road and slam into the railings. And
So,
we don't know what happened there.
So you think that might have been put there to cover up the fact there was no damage?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
You see the crumple up front of the car, and they're careful not to show you pictures of that front, which I think would show no blood at all on the front of the car. You certainly don't see any blood anywhere. Mm-hmm. The whole Westminster thing has an absence of blood. Blood is so difficult to fake, you see, because it starts off bright red, then turns brown. So it's going to look silly, the fake blood, which they've done in other events, and that could be why they didn't hardly wanting any on this whole Westminster Bridge affair.
This viewer says, the Lancaster Guardian is owned by Johnston Press, who are co-owned by Bell Pottinger. The editor of the Lancaster Guardian is Glenn Cooper. His son, Owen Cooper, who studies history and politics at Edgehill University, was, according to the Lancaster Guardian, injured in the attack. So people are pointing out that there's famous authors or directors or people who are connected to the media who are the injured parties. Other people are suggesting that they're actors or dummies. So this viewer is pointing out that somebody called Stephen Voke, V-O-A-K-E, was interviewed on the BBC, and he is apparently a very well-respected children's author who is highly publicised and applauded by the BBC. I think there was a Daily Mail journalist as well who was one of the first to report seeing the police officer being attacked. I remember rightly. Yeah. So here's another comment from a viewer. Need to say my friend works in Westminster Palace as a fire officer. The policeman who was killed at the gate, he knew. I believe you also made a reference to CCTV cameras. There aren't any on doorways and windows. They rely on beams, etc. I think since this incident there are cameras. I do not believe this to be a fake incident. The widow of the policeman was known to the fire officers who helped her clear out his locker. So this is what I'm getting a lot of second and third and fourth hand accounts.
I heard people at one of your events actually telling me that they knew the family of that police officer and it was totally real. I mean, that guy's totally gone and disappeared. I mean, excuse me saying so, but the appeal, I think, ran up to about £1 million of funding donation for that family. So, you know, there is a financial angle to this. And people who disappear, they get an exciting new life. Maybe he wanted it. I mean, I may be totally wrong, but you can change identity, and I think they do this. If he's dead, show us a proper death certificate, show us real evidence of, you know, funeral and burial or whatever, and then we'll believe it. I mean, what we're calling for, Richard, is discussion and presentation of the evidence, as opposed to what you get in the media. You get quickly a predetermined story given to you, and then you're told, oh, forget about it when the next terror event comes up. Well, no, I think we do need to look at how these events are created and fabricated, I mean, real deaths do take place in these events, and let's try to just look at the evidence, let time go by as we get the data.
Mm-hmm. This viewer points out Theresa May's speech and states, Theresa May gives a jingoistic speech about an hour or so later equal to Churchill's fight them on the beaches oratory. Wonder how long that was in draft form.
Yeah, exactly. A predetermined narrative is very much part of these events, like Tony Blair on the same day as London bombing 7/7 saying we know who did this, they did it in the name of Islam. That immediately, like for example with the Manchester event, you get the Sun newspaper coming out with pretty well synchronously with the event, with its stories of trying to smear Labour and bombs being put off and so on. So as your viewer says, that is real evidence, I think, of state involvement.
Right. Okay. So what was this thing that we forgot to mention that you said about the yellow sign or something?
Well, right in the middle of the Westminster Bridge, on the pavement, was a big yellow sign saying, this bridge is going to be closed the next week, traffic diversion, and so on. And we went to look at it a week later, it was still there. And there is no way any car could have driven along the pavement with that right in the middle of the bridge. So that is, as it were, the Empire testing. Can they get away with all the world's media reporting something totally impossible of a car driving along that bridge when you've got a big yellow sign there? So it couldn't possibly have happened. It's as simple as that, really.
Right. Is there a photograph of the sign?
Yeah. All the photographs of the event show that yellow sign is there.
Right. So why couldn't the car have mounted the pavement with that sign being there?
Well, because it would have to have driven through that sign. It was right on the pavement.
Right.
It's in the middle of the bridge. I mean, you can't have it fiendishly driving along and then coming off and then going back on again, because the bridge is too short for all that.
Right. I see. And were there victims either side of the sign?
Yeah. The simulated victims, I would say dummies, were on either side of that sign.
Right.
Yeah.
So, devil's advocate question: could the sign not have been put there after it happened?
Well, I just said all the photographs show it's there. There's no photographs of the London Bridge which don't show that yellow sign.
Right. So,
Westminster Bridge,
right,
which don't show that yellow sign. Yeah.
So there's photographs of the sign there before the event as well, is there?
Well,
or immediately
you only have photographs immediately after.
Immediately after.
Yeah.
Right. Immediately after.
Right.
Right. So it's highly unlikely someone's going to put a sign like that up straight after this event.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the event. It was just a formal London Transport notice of diversion.
Right. Well, for good. I haven't seen that image, Nick. So that would be a useful image to put up.
Oh right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you think those who orchestrated it just overlooked the fact that there might have been static signs on the footpath?
Well, I would say the people organising it are basically secret military intelligence, and those are not in control of the civil authorities of London Transport, who put the notice up.
Right.
And so, for whatever reason, they didn't remove it, which is very strange.
I see. Right, here's another viewer comment. I met a serving ITV cameraman yesterday after he and two of the cameramen had given talks on their experiences, mainly humorous. During his talk, the ITV cameraman mentioned he had been on Westminster Bridge 2 minutes after the incident, which he referred to as a terrorist attack. I spoke to him aside afterwards. He didn't see the car hit anyone, only the aftermath, particularly the injured American woman and her dead or dying husband. He seemed to concede they could have been actors, although his impression at the time was it was real. He didn't film anything, saying it was industry standard ethics not to film injured or dead people, which intrigued me, as they have done so in the past, and after all, they don't have to broadcast what they film.
Marcel, those American injured, Kurt and Melissa Cochrane, I think, that those were actually real actors, so to speak, because, as I said earlier, you mainly see dummies on the bridge, but those two were like real actors, yeah. And there was a big thing about Melissa having her leg broken and being in hospital, and 4 days later she's back and okay again.
Right, so you're convinced that they were just acting?
And filmed beforehand. And there's no way the guy Kurt could have been knocked so far right down the stairs, down away from the bridge.
I queried the official narrative and said...
I beg one. The car, that was right at the beginning of the bridge, and the traffic's moving quite slowly, so the car mounting up on the bridge would have had to be going quite slowly. So it couldn't have biffed that couple so that they go flying through the air some great distance. That would just have been, it's just totally impossible.
Right. I queried the official narrative and said some concerned citizens viewed the event as a hoax. His reaction was interesting in that he was clearly uncomfortable, but at the same time seemed genuine. He may have had his own doubts. He had a colleague, I think his boss, who claimed to have seen people being thrown through the air by the car. Yet another example of hearsay. So
hearsay,
we get the people who explain the events as the official narrative would contend are all second, third, fourth hand witnesses. I've not seen any or any first hand witnesses come to me and offer to be interviewed or what have you.
Yeah, hang on, I just remember, I beg your pardon. The Kurt picture, I'm so sorry, the Kurt, that's the guy, he gets biffed, he goes right down the stairs and ends up in a little alcove, okay? His whole leg is bent in an anatomically impossible position. So what you see there, allegedly Kurt, it has to be a dummy, the human body cannot bend in that shape. So
well, even if there's a broken leg.
Even if there's a broken leg, it can't curve round. If you have a look at the picture.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's another example of dummy being used.
Okay, let's come on to Manchester,
Right.
Nick.
Right.
I've got some diagrams here. I'll just first explain whereabouts in the stadium this took place. So we have an enclosed stadium with doors around the perimeter.
Yeah.
And we have a building sort of appended to the side of this main stadium with a foyer area. And there are a number, I don't know, maybe a dozen, quite a few doors within this foyer area. So they obviously have these large areas for when people are coming out, there's areas for them to spill into. So they've got these wide open areas outside the main stadium through these doors where you've got the box office, some stairs, etc. So this large foyer area, which is outside the main stadium, so people who were watching the show or were sat in the stadium wouldn't have seen what happened.
No.
So this is where the alleged bomb is supposed to have gone off, where 22 or 23 victims died.
22, yeah.
119 injured in this foyer area.
Yeah.
And his torso is alleged to have landed inside the arena.
Yeah.
Now,
It's also the terrorist, yeah.
Right. I've appealed for witnesses. I've had one first-hand witness, so I can read his account out. And there's another person contacted me who was in Facebook contact with a first-hand witness. So her Facebook private message, I can read that out as well. So I have got two first-hand witness accounts, right, which I'll read out in a second. Now, should we start by you reading out the quote that you read earlier?
That's when the concert ended, this whole thing happened as the big Arena Grande concert was just ending. A whole lot of security agents were standing there stopping people from going into the foyer, which was the main natural exit from the concert.
Right, so these security people, were they inside the arena or on the other side of the foyer? I guess they're inside the arena.
Yeah, I'll just read from, this is from the Daily Mail, a witness, Jenny Brewster. We were exiting the building when it happened. We were headed towards the main doors while the last song being formed wanted to beat the crowds, but as we made our way there, a wall of security men blocked it and told us to go the other way. Seconds later they shouted, "Run," and the explosion happened right behind them. Hundreds of people were running and screaming. So that's an account of somebody who did hear a bang, and it was right behind this wall of security agents. In other words, in the foyer.
Right.
So this may remind you of the big affair in Paris, where there's a big football stadium and the bangs are heard over the PA system, and it's alleged that there's a terrorist bomber outside which nobody ever sees. I don't know if you remember that.
Right.
So I make an analogy there. All these people in a concert hall hear a bang in a foyer and they're not there and they don't stream out that way. Right. So that's a closed off area where a preset drama goes on.
So according to that witness, there's certain security people who were preventing anyone going through those doors, and they're told to go a different way, and after that, then the bang happens.
Yeah.
Or two bangs as well.
Yeah.
We'll come on to the bang. We'll come on to the bangs.
Sounded like more like gunshots or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll come on to that. Right. So according to that witness's statements, it looks like that area was being controlled by whoever was blocking those doors.
Yeah, yeah. And also, as we've seen before, as if they'd rehearsed and practiced the whole thing there maybe a week or two before, and they got film from a week or two before, because there's basically two different pictures we see of that foyer, and they're not quite the same, as if they're trying to look the same, but the various groups of actors and wounded lying around there, and they're not quite the same in these two different pictures. But more important, that there's a large empty space, you see, right at the centre of this forum area, and there can't possibly be 119 plus 22 injured and dead. That's where they'd have to be.
Right, let's come on to that then. So the official stated injuries is 119, and you would imagine that there can't have really been any injuries inside the arena behind the doors.
No,
because they were being guarded. So they would have all had to have been in this box office foyer area. 119 injured plus 23 dead. So how many is that? That's quite a lot. It's 100 and,
Yeah.
140 odd.
Let's just point out that, yeah, that is the 9/11 number obviously being used. This
Right.
is coded numbers.
So there should be, okay, some of the injured might have ran out, right, if they're still able to move, right? So there should be of the order of 100 people lying around in this foyer.
Yeah, all you see no epicentre of the bomb blast, no clue of any bomb having gone off anywhere, and the people you do see, the groups of wounded, are far enough away from the camera that you can't tell if they're really real people or real dummies or what. And the people tending them with these yellow coats don't look like real medical personnel. Okay, they look like actors wearing yellow coats, rather bored actors.
Right. The other thing I would say from that image, I can't see any damage to the decor or the lighting or the doors or the windows.
No, right.
I can't see any damage other to the building itself.
Right. Yeah. And apart from this bit of evidence you just quoted, nobody really hears a bang. There's virtually no photographs of any bang, any bright light, any blast.
Let's come on to that, Nick. So here's a witness who's contacted me. He says, hello, Richard. I am contacting you about the incident that happened in Manchester Arena on the 22nd of May this year. I'm not sure if my information will be of great use to you, but it may help towards you clearing up a few small details. I was outside the arena when the incident occurred. My girlfriend and stepdaughter were inside. We had planned to meet at the exit where the explosion was reported to have taken place. I was running a few minutes late and my girlfriend and stepdaughter decided not to leave immediately at the end of the concert because my stepdaughter wanted to wait behind to see if she could get one of the pink balloons that were released into the crowd just before the concert had ended. We had planned to meet at 10:30 p.m. at the arena exit that led to the train station. So that's this foyer area.
Right.
As I knew I was running slightly late, I know exactly where I was when the bomb was reported to have gone off at 10:33 p.m. because at 10:32 I checked the time on my phone to see how late I was running.
Yeah.
So when the explosion was reported to have gone off, I would have been walking towards the arena down Corporation Street, just about to approach the National Football Museum. Despite this being fairly close to the arena, I didn't hear any explosion.
Right.
I am not saying there wasn't one, I am just saying my honest account in case any details are important.
Right.
As I turned left off Corporation Street onto Todd Street, I started to see people running towards me. As they got closer, I could see they were full of fear and the kids were crying and screaming.
Yeah.
A few more seconds passed and there were more and more flying past me. I asked one of the adults what had happened and she just said, explosion, and carried on running.
Right.
My girlfriend, who was in block 103. Now block 103, as you see here in the diagram, it's on the same side of the stadium, in the centre of the stadium as the foyer. So it's not that far from the foyer area.
Right.
So my girlfriend was in block 103 at the time of the explosion. She said to me on the way back to our hotel that she heard two loud bangs.
Two bangs, right.
Two loud bangs separated by around 5 seconds.
Right.
So based on the fact my girlfriend has no reason to lie, I can report there were two loud bangs. She thought it might be a gunman, so she started to run for the exit. But instead of turning left, as we'd planned before the concert, she had to turn right towards a different exit because everyone seemed to be running away from the left-hand exit.
Right.
Right? So that concurs with what your witness says, isn't it?
Away from the foyer,
and they were, according to your witness, they were told to run the other direction, right?
Yeah.
So this witness, who was in the stadium, was going to go through those doors, heard two bangs, and everyone else was running the other direction.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Let me just finish the statement, Nick. I should add that I didn't see any dead bodies or injuries, and neither did my girlfriend or stepdaughter. This doesn't mean I don't think people had died or got injured. I'm just giving my account to help you with your research. So two bangs that sounded like a gun going off. Now let me just make a comment to that, right? If you say that 119 people have been injured and 23 killed with an explosion, that's quite a bit of collateral damage. Now, the explosives have a certain velocity, and when they strike the target, that target will then suffer damage, which will produce noise, which will go on for a particular period. The point I'm making is a gunshot is a very different sound to a large ordnance type explosion, which will resonate for a good number of seconds.
Totally, yeah.
It's not. You're not going to describe it as a gunshot.
No, you're not. No. Right.
And we've got other witnesses saying it sounded like a gunshot.
Right. Can I just add to that? The time, 10:33, 10 o'clock that's 22 hours and 22 echoes. It's on the 22nd. 22 died. A 22-year-old guy did it. And we've seen previously that this keeps echoing through the dates that are selected, and 33 is obviously a Masonic type number, like the previous. We looked at the previous Westminster Bridge. That is 322, right? That's the Skull and Bones number, 322. So that was the Westminster Bridge. This then happens 3 months later, and again you get the number 22. So these funny numbers do pop up.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me read this second witness account, Nick. So this is someone who's contacted me who was talking to someone in private message on Facebook on that night. Right. And he sent me a screenshot. I'm not going to show the screenshot or reveal any names, but he sent me a screenshot of the private message. Right. So this is a girl who was in the concert. So she's asked, were you quite close to it? And she replies, and yeah, the doors that the explosions happened behind were only 17 seats away from where I was.
Right.
Right. So where that row of doors is, 17 seats is where this girl is from. So she's close.
Right.
The other thing that this witness says, she describes as 2 explosions, not 1. Right.
So it's impossible. The story we're given is a suicide bomber blows himself to, goes off to paradise, blows himself, and his torso is ripped apart as usual, and his driving licence is safely preserved, enabling him to be identified. And then, thank goodness for the CIA, they tell us a few hours afterwards in Washington who it was who did it, and the British press learned from America who the guy was.
Right.
I mean, it's the usual kind of totally impossible storyline.
Yeah, I would have thought there's going to be damage to those doors. If his torso landed inside the arena, there's going to be serious damage to the doors, isn't there?
Well, obviously the whole story is totally fictional, and it happened, the timing of this thing is important, right after the event. It was a big NATO security thing in Europe. It was called Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism on the very next day, 23rd of May, in Vienna. So a big NATO conference that gets the kind of sense of meaning and purpose from this terror event. They don't draw the very obvious conclusion that the people organising the NATO conference are probably responsible for the event.
Right. This viewer says, I have lived in Manchester my whole life and found the bomb very strange. As you say, a packed arena with thousands of kids, plus camera phones. No footage of bomb aftermath. 20 ambulances all pulled up as if on cue, as if they had been waiting at BBC Media City 2 miles down the road, cough, cough. Did you see that footage of the Queen visiting the injured at a Salford hospital? Bizarre, worth a look if you missed it.
Yeah, that was
This is another thing, they seem to use royals to provide the sympathy to these events.
Yeah, the Queen asked one of the nurses, were you all right? Did you manage it all right? And the nurse replied something like, yes, we'd practiced the event very thoroughly, so everything was okay.
Ma'am, we was introduced to a gentleman here who was the first on the scene as a paramedic from our ambulance services.
Oh, were you?
Your Majesty.
So you happened to be the first one, were you?
I was from the ambulance service.
Because a lot of you were there. I mean, a lot of ambulances appeared, didn't they?
There were around 60 ambulances.
But did you do all practice? It's extraordinary.
Your Majesty. Yeah, we'd all practiced about a month ago, which it all worked like clockwork. Your Majesty.
Here's a comment, and I don't know how genuine this is. This is allegedly from former Coronation Street star Jewel Hesmondlaw. Apparently tweeted, my husband and daughter were at AG gig at MEN, M-E-N, and there was panic, but someone came on stage and said no explosion, just a balloon.
Did they? Oh, right. That sounds, oh, right, okay.
I don't know.
Haven't heard that before.
Right, right. Hello, Richard. Check out Northwest Ambulance Facebook page. See posts for the afternoon of the 22nd of May. Also saw interview with paramedic on 23rd, where he confirmed drill at the arena a few weeks ago, exact same circumstances. Not the Trafford Centre one,
Yeah.
but can't find it now.
Oh, right. Well, that'll
So
be
according to
interesting.
this viewer, this paramedic has said a few weeks earlier there was a drill at the arena.
Right, because what he said, the Trafford, that was a year before, and a lot of people commented how similar that seems. You get a terrorist setting off a bomb in this big shopping mall, everybody rushes. You see a whole lot of crisis actors trying to look wounded and running away and so on. So you see a picture of the whole event, or something looking very much like the whole event, a year before.
Frighteningly realistic. A shopping centre in Manchester transformed into our worst nightmare. The scene of a terror attack. This blood and these screams, fake here though. Emergency services taking part in a major anti-terror exercise overnight at the Trafford Centre. Armed with machine guns, officers testing their response to a potential Paris or Brussels type attack on British soil. A threat at the forefront of so many minds. The hundreds involved knew they were in no danger, but still howled in distress during the role play. Greater Manchester Police, the North West Counter-Terrorism Unit and the North West Ambulance Service being tested, none knowing exactly how the mock attack would unfold. Authorities have stressed there is no threat looming here, but that they need to be ready for every eventuality. And with the UK on high alert to a possible terror attack, exercises like this could hold the key to saving countless lives.
This viewer is saying if there's 22 killed, there must be at least 100 with life-changing injuries. How come we haven't seen any of these? Right. Now let's just talk about John Pilger, because I criticised John Pilger in a previous show. Now he wrote an article about the alleged bomber and about this supposed terrorist group that the alleged bomber was a member of.
Right, yeah.
So and that seemed to spark some mainstream media front pages after John Pilger had written this article. I'm just going to read a little bit from the John Pilger article. He states, "The unsayable in Britain's general election campaign is this. The causes of the Manchester atrocity, in which 22 mostly young people were murdered by a jihadist, are being suppressed to protect the secrets of British foreign policy."
Very true, yeah.
Well, but you refute the deaths, though, don't you?
Well, apparent deaths, yeah.
Yeah. Critical questions such as why the security service MI5 maintained terrorist assets in Manchester and why the government did not warn the public of the threat in their midst remain unanswered, deflected by the promise of an internal review. The alleged suicide bomber, Salman Abedi, was part of an extremist group, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, that thrived in Manchester and was cultivated and used by MI5 for more than 20 years. The LIFG is prescribed by Britain as a terrorist organisation which seeks a hardline Islamic state in Libya and is part of the wider global Islamist extremist movement as inspired by Al-Qaeda. Right, so what John Pilger's saying is MI5 knew about this guy, they knew he was part of this terrorist group, and the government are keeping quiet about that, right? Now, he's not going further in suggesting, well, he's not suggesting why the hell the government would harbour such a person, is he?
No.
Right, and that's my beef with John Pilger, that he's
giving
room for the fact that it's just bumbling mistakes by the security services, that they were kind of keeping an eye on this guy and they weren't keeping a close enough eye on him, so he kind of did it of his own volition.
Yeah.
Pilger's giving room for that, isn't he?
Yeah, we could describe this in terms of lie-hop versus my-hop. Lie-hop is let it happen on purpose, that the government sort of knew this terrorist was planning something dreadful and may have allowed him to do it because they need a bit of terror, okay? And my-hop is make it happen on purpose, that the government sets up the whole thing and gets this guy as a patsy, apparently to do something, and actually he hasn't.
Right. Okay, I'll credit John.
Sorry, anyone in the media cannot promote my help. There's no published media that will allow that.
Right. Okay, I'll credit John Pilger for bringing this up, but I'd also criticise him for not suggesting that it could be my hop. Right. But as you say, he wouldn't be allowed a platform in the mainstream media, and how sad is that? Right. Now, let's just expand a little bit more on the likes of John Pilger, right? Because you made a very interesting comment last night about John Pilger and others. You called them, what was it, left-wing, 20th century socialists.
All the great gurus from the left-wing socialist movement, anti-war movement, CND, came over into the century and they couldn't really adapt to what happened with 9/11, the massive scale of the deception.
You include, what is it, Noam Chomsky in this?
Noam Chomsky, totally, right. Yeah.
So he was good before the turn of the century.
Yeah, he was a great inspiring force for the anti-war and sort of radical. Everyone thought they were radical.
But after 9/11, something happens that he can't possibly report the truth about.
Yeah, the plot changes completely, and a new generation of people appear that understand 9/11 to varying degrees and different points of view, and those are the people we need to listen to now. And I have great admiration for Pilger, wonderful, great journalist who bothers to go to the war-torn scenes and find out what's really happened.
Well, he doesn't find out what really happened, does he?
Well, he sees, he witnesses what is the aftermath of British policy, but he can't quite go as far as saying, you know, these events are fabricated by the government or by unknown secret agents. He can't quite go that far. Nobody can. Nobody can in the printed media. That is a different culture, which is web-based.
Right. So Pilger and his ilk, what they do is they'll suggest that it's just the foreign policy that make these things happen.
Blowback. Blowback. Like George Galloway, for example.
Yeah, Galloway's another one.
Say London bombing is blowback, which is an extreme reasonable view, but it happens not to be the case.
Yeah.
It happens, those people didn't actually do it. And you only get that realisation by going into a close focus of looking at the detail of the actual events. That these terrorists are not actually there. That guy who allegedly had his torso blown in two, he wasn't there, that didn't happen.
Right, this viewer here is pointing out the two different layouts of the casualties from different videos that have been produced. We've mentioned that. All right, now this comment might lead us on to the book, Nick. So this viewer says, the Manchester bombings happened only days before the G7 NATO meeting. I just thought this was a bit coincidental when you think about the goals of former Operation Gladio. There's a good BBC documentary
from
absolutely.
I'd like to remind you, reader, of what happened in 2004 with the Madrid events, okay? Madrid railway station, terrible explosions there, and that was immediately after a big 3 or 4 day NATO meeting, big European NATO event, which focused on terrorism in capital cities, counteracting terrorism, and then within 24 hours that had happened. So these things are sort of temporally linked. Yeah.
Right. So let's come on to the next book, which starts in 1992, terrorist incidents from 1992 in Europe, and it goes up to what date, Nick? The end of 2016?
Yeah.
So Nick's published this book, and it's just starting to sell now, but it's out of date already because we've had 3 terrorist incidents which aren't included. So and this is the nature of this beast, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah. It's fast moving.
Yeah.
But I've looked at a dozen major terrorist events in Europe, and the purpose is to try and get a European narrative going, because nearly all the books published are about America, about these things happening in America, and the whole thing may have been brewed up in America and come over to Europe with the Al-Qaeda terror menace. We're all told by governments that there's a fiendish terrorists out there, which are threatening our very way of life, and that's why we need to give more and more money to the military and security services. And we're all given phantom, fictional, fabricated stories, in Ukraine, in France, in Spain, in earlier on in Italy, in London, perhaps most of all. London's the very centre of where these things are originated.
All right, so we'll just touch on Gladio then itself. So this is earlier, this is 1980s, before the Berlin Wall came down.
Yeah.
And it was terrorist operations designed to undermine Russia. Is that right? Or Soviet Union?
Well, it was designed to reinforce the commie menace. Europe wasn't sufficiently frightened of the communist enemy menace, and they were trying to bring cruise missiles and stuff into Europe. And Italy, especially, was the brunt of terrible events at Bologna railway station and other places where bombs, civilian casualties, and it was blamed on the communists. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Italy is the one country that's had a very thorough inquiry into all this, and looked at the kind of NATO origin of Gladio. It's stay-behind armies set up by NATO to protect against the commie menace, and they then generated these events so that people could be given the story of the communist menace.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, at the beginning of the book, you compare 9/11 and 7/7. Why have you done that? Why do you feel the need to compare those two? Well,
they're given the same demonised enemy image, Al Qaeda, and 7/7, and before that, the Madrid bombings was the new Al Qaeda enemy image, Islamic, which had been brewed up in America, coming over into Europe. So Britain had to take that hit to reinforce the reality of the fiendish enemy, which was Islam, and that was the price it had to pay. It got a reward immediately synchronising with that was the decision that Britain would get the Olympic Games, and the whole G7 up in Scotland was over the time of the London bombing, and that was connected with it all. Could just add, there's details. Both events are fourfold. Both happen in the morning, 9 or 10 o'clock. Similar numerology patterns.
Just to mention, with regards to 9/11 and 7/7, I can state that they were fabricated events. They were false flag events because of the amount of research and work that I and others have presented on Rich Planet and on other platforms and in books, etc. It's an established fact as far as I'm concerned. Unlike the cases that we've just discussed, right? I'm not happy because I've not done enough investigation into them. Clearly, we've pointed out a lot of anomalies earlier, but we're now going to go through some more cases which you believe are state-fabricated terror. Let's start with two that you believe were perpetrated by Israel on itself in 1992 and 1994, allegedly bombing its own embassy in Argentina and then in London.
Yeah. Well, this is a very crucial decade because the Iron Curtain just came down in 1991 and the commie menace disappeared. So these enormous military establishments in Britain and America were very alarmed because they didn't have an enemy anymore. And how could they keep getting all these, billions of dollars without an enemy? And during that decade, the new enemy image, which was Islam, was being brewed up, okay? And I suggest these two events, both of them got blamed on Muslims who weren't in any sense present at the event. First time the Israeli embassy blows up in Buenos Aires, 1992, and then it's alleged, there's an alleged truck, I won't go into details, but an alleged truck drives up and blows up, and that truck isn't really there. The explosion is within the embassy. And then 94, in London, it's a Millionaires' Row, very high security area, and as it happens, chance would have it, the Israelis were out of their embassy at the time when it blew up, and nobody was seriously injured, and that was then went through with sort of high security secrecy, the discussion, and two Muslims got put in jail who weren't actually present, and they were Palestinian peace activists. I'm not sure whether they're Muslims. They were Palestinian peace activists, pro-Palestine, that they got put in jail. So that undermined the cause they were promoting. Right. And the whole thing was shrouded in secrecy. And David Shayler was the hero, actually, of this story, because he had been working in MI5, and he came forward with documents he'd seen indicating that Israel had blown up its own embassy, and I heard him say that. That's where I got
Right.
the title from.
Okay. 2002, the Bali bomb. Do you want to comment on that, or will we skip forward to?
Well, yeah. Although that's not European, I included it. I felt it was so important as the process of transition. A guy was put in jail for letting off a truck bomb of ammonium nitrate, that's fertilizer, and actually it was a mini nuke that blew up in Bali. You add 1 to 9/11/2001 and you get 10/12/2002, which is the Bali bomb date, and a whole lot of things are vaporised around the beach there where it goes off. A whole lot of bodies are vaporised. You see a mushroom cloud in the sky, and it's shocking. And so there would have been radioactive contaminated soil, and it's amazing that those perpetrating this event can then get all the media to report that it's just a fertilizer bomb. You know, I think that is quite astonishing. And some hapless Muslim called Amrotsi gets given the blame.
Right. That
enhances all the security of Southeast Asia and Australia. They get increased funding, security services, and it's used to beef up people psychologically for the Iraq War.
Madrid train bombing, which was precursor to the London bombing.
Yeah, that was real bomb. People really killed, and that was 9/11 days after 9/11, as pointed out, the date of it, and there was a big trial. A bunch of Muslims were found guilty, but there was never much evidence. But what's important is that those early events are absolutely real deaths, real horrible, gruesome deaths, real blood, as opposed to what we get in recent years.
So this is the contention that you make in the book, that round about 2012, the attacks before that date are on the whole real deaths, and all, it's just the perpetrator that's incorrectly interpreted in the mainstream media. But after round about 2012, you're saying that there's a lot more fabrication and pretend deaths.
Apparently dummies and crisis actors can do it. It starts with the Boston bombing in America. You see a whole lot of crisis actors. It's perfectly obvious. You can see them wandering around, and fake blood. And then we get the next year, Drummer-Lee Rigby in England. You get some sort of dummy put in the middle of the street without any blood.
It causes a huge amount of controversy, the Woolwich-Lee Rigby thing. And again, well, there was a trial, and we've said that when the perpetrator is killed, you just get an inquest, you don't get a trial, but there was a trial in that case.
I was there. I went there, the Old Bailey. I saw these two sitting there. They weren't allowed to speak. I don't know if they were allowed to speak.
All right, well, just give us your experience then of that. So if you went to the actual trial, right?
Yeah, well, I'm saying
you're in quite a good position to report on what evidence was presented by the prosecution to get them locked away, which they are.
Well, in these terror trials, there is more or less no defence, you see, because all the media have already found these people guilty and vilified them, so no lawyer is going to really defend them. And so it's predetermined at this trial that it's basically predetermined that they're guilty.
All right, let me just interrupt you. So they didn't have a lawyer?
Yeah, they did have a defence lawyer, but he's not really doing anything. That's my impression.
Right. So their lawyer didn't stand up and say, look, my client was duped into taking part in an MI5 terrorist attack.
That doesn't happen. No.
But why wouldn't they get a lawyer if that's what happened?
Well, it's called the war on terror.
Let's go down that avenue, because if what you're saying is true, that they either brought an already dead body or a dummy out of a vehicle, loaded off the back of a van, made it look like it crashed into the rail and it hadn't. So they closed the road beforehand. There's a dummy or
road was closed beforehand,
or an already dead body.
And
then he starts brandishing this knife around, right?
Yeah.
And maybe he's doing it because he thinks it's a training exercise, or because he's under mind control.
And it's all photographed beforehand, a week or two beforehand.
Right.
A whole lot of,
So their defence would be they made us do it. Surely that would be their defence, would be, well, hang on, we were taking part in either a drill or an exercise or a fabricated event, so you need to question the state, not us.
Yeah.
So why isn't there a defence being put like that in, say, the Lee Rigby case? Is that because their lawyer is bought and paid for and is part of the system, you would say, or?
Well, it's
Part of the bar?
it's called the War on Terror,
Right.
which means the police aren't there to find clues and to supply to a court. The police are there to fight a war, and the enemy is been defined. And these guys, they are the wicked villains, and they've done it. And the court can't doubt what all the media have established and been saying
Really?
for quite a long time. So the defence law is a kind of formality there. And the guys, I didn't hear them speak at all. Adzi Bellagio or whatever, sitting in a glass case. I didn't hear them speak at all, but they're there basically to take the blame.
So you would say that...
And no aspect of the totally absurd and absolutely physically impossible sequence of events whereby a car careers across the road, slams into a post, the guy gets out with an axe, starts hacking the guy's head off, and there's no blood on the pavement, then they throw it into the middle of the road. There's no point at which that is physically possible.
Right. So you would say that the rules for such trials are different to a normal trial, normal criminal trial?
Well, the nature of the procedure, yeah. With the War on Terror, it's more kind of rhetorical. It's limited.
And do you know if that's actually enshrined in law?
No, I don't know.
Right.
No,
So,
I mean I've been to two actually. I went to the Joe Cox whole trial there, and just rather briefly to the Lee Rigby Adzi Bellagio trial. And so that's my understanding.
Right. So just tell us about the Joe Cox trial and the defence. I can't remember the name of the perpetrator.
Well, rather digressing, there's not a chapter in my book about this, because
yeah.
I didn't feel it quite fell into the false flag terror category.
Right.
But I feel it's extremely doubtful whether Thomas Mayer killed Joe Cox. I don't feel that is in the slightest bit established.
Right.
So.
All right, let's move forward in time then.
But hang on, if I can just say about Lee Rigby, because we had a bit of trouble earlier discussion on this subject. I've got a whole section in the chapter called "Did He Exist?" Is there a real character called Lee Rigby? And it's very difficult to get any proper data on his existence. He starts off as McClure, Lee McClure, and then he allegedly changes his name when his mother remarries. And the battalion that he allegedly belongs to has dissolved, it's broken up, so they haven't got records that you can consult. And you keep me telling, oh, he's in Cyprus, oh, he's in Afghanistan, oh no, he's recruiting at the Tower of London, oh no, he's helping at Haberdasher School, encourage kids, and you keep hearing the wonderful things he's done, and then you keep hearing, oh no, he's just a private. And a chap who really looked into it was called Chris Spivey, and he rather doubted whether Lee Rigby existed at all. And I wasn't sure. Initially, I think you and I both didn't doubt that he was a real character and really got bumped off maybe the day before. So I think that's very much open now.
Well, my opinion on it is I don't have an opinion because I haven't done a detailed investigation and I don't trust the media or the trial.
Or as enormous charity revenues, way over £1 million, several £1 million, that I think goes towards the Rigby family and the foundations they set up and so on. And that's very much why Chris Spivey was told by the, I think, High Court to shut up, and he's not allowed to talk at all about it now. So that's all quite mysterious. All I'm prepared to say definitely is that on that day, the scene, Artillery Road, we were given, there was no deaths. Nobody was killed. The blanks were fired by the police. Crisis actors lay down in the road, and they kicked their feet around a bit, and nobody died. No.
Right. Okay, that's your opinion. As I say, I don't have an opinion on that event.
Right.
If viewers want to provide any evidence of what they believe happened, then fine, send us evidence. But if there's going to be any testimony evidence, it's got to be first-hand witnesses. If you know a first-hand witness who saw something, you've got to get them to agree to an interview. Send them my way. Send them contact details, and I'll interview them. Right. Saying someone told you something is not good enough. Right. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
Okay, photographic evidence may well be okay as long as it's not been doctored. But that really didn't show what happened, did it? The CCTV with Lee Rigby. They allegedly showed some footage at the trial, which they actually cut off at the point where the guy's supposed to get knocked over.
Yeah,
you can see that, and that was released months and months after it happened.
Yeah,
so they would have had time to prepare.
And then after we had a sceptical critique saying this whole thing couldn't have happened, then at the inquest they changed the whole story, right? Without going into detail, they originally hit Lee Rigby just by this post where the car crumples up, and then they leap out and hack him to bits. And then at the inquest they have, oh no, the car is crossing the road, veering across the road. Normally a very busy street, you couldn't possibly do that. It veers across the road and it hits Lee Rigby in the middle of the road, and he's knocked up onto the bonnet of the car, and then it goes around on the pavement and it carries Lee Rigby on the bonnet of the car with them, and then hits the lamppost, it hits the post. So they changed the whole story at the inquest.
The trial?
The trial, yeah.
Right. Okay, Nick, are there any other prominent cases you want to touch on that you cover in this book? We've got, so after Lee Rigby, you believe this whole fabricated terror phenomenon changes its modus operandi.
Yeah.
With more fakery, less deaths, more fabricated deaths. That's your contention.
Yeah,
right?
Well, it's hard to get evidence of real deaths, and terrific use of, first of all, crisis actors, and then dummies. Somebody decrees somewhere that dummies look good.
So if you're right, then why do you think they've done that?
Well, for example, the Nice event, you get dummies with a big white lorry. You get a lot of dummies strewn along the road, and they're quite obviously dummies. And it reminds you very much of what you see on the Westminster Bridge event. Brussels, you get dummies in. And the thing about rubber dummies, they're liable to have anatomically impossible positions when they're lying down, or a hand is rigidly stuck up, or the bum isn't quite touching the ground. And you can't easily get their postures correct.
And you provide a case for this in each of the chapter where you cover each terrorist event. You know, the evidence for your claims of them using more dummies and being fabricated, all in the book, yeah?
Well, I hope so, yeah.
Let me just...
And also the idea of crisis actors, which very much comes out from America, you get companies which advertise crisis actors and talks about the drama that you have to prepare for, and then companies are encouraged to build resilience into your company by going through these drill rehearsals with us. And so the use of dummies is a part of companies taking training in resilience, whereby you prepare for a catastrophe.
Let me just give a hypothetical theory, a hypothetical scenario, right? What might explain some of these more recent events. So perhaps there are different categories of training exercises. So you have a training exercise which is completely closed off to the public, where you've got emergency services there, they have actors and they have fake blood and all the rest of it, and the actors scream and shout as though they're injured, and then they're not injured. So they practice these things, and that is known to be true. They've practiced, but it's done without the public oversight or without public involvement.
Right, yeah.
Perhaps there's another category of training exercise.
Well, let me just give an example. Before the Brussels event in 2016, on the spring equinox, 2 days before, there was a huge London training exercise, mega terror drill, and then just before that, there was a huge train pile-up, a mock of West Waterloo Station, and there was a huge EU grant given of millions of pounds for them to do this. So they were mandated by the EU to have a huge terror drill with people painted with blood and painted with legs chopped off and everything, and you see all these crisis actors. So they're told to do this, and so you get a whole lot of film footage available, which then can then be used.
Okay, so that's category A, right, of training exercise, where the public are not involved and there's no oversight.
Right.
Category B might be, well, what we're going to do this training exercise, but in order to test the responses of our emergency services, etc., we want the public to believe that it's true, because we want a genuine reaction from the public, we want a genuine reaction from the media, we want a genuine reaction from the people nearby and in the stadium.
Yeah.
So this training exercise. So I'm hypothesizing here, folks. I'm not saying that they do this, but perhaps they do this, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to run a training exercise. So all the operatives involved in the training exercise is told, look, you must go along and as if this was real, because the public, we want the public to react as though it were real so that we can test our responses. In other words, we're doing a far more realistic training exercise where we're making the public think it's real, and the media, so that we can monitor public responses and all the rest of it. Right?
So that's why realism has to be built into the thing, as much realism as possible.
So then, that's why you would have had operatives close off this door. These doors are lined up there to say, right, no, turn away from the door. They then got control of this area in here. Everyone in the exercise gets in position. Off it goes. Everyone in the arena thinks it's real. All the media are told that it's real. All the politicians are told that it's real. There's a small few involved in the training exercise that know it's not.
And let's just say here that the crisis actors signed confidentiality agreements beforehand. They're bound by silence. So when it all happens, they think, oh God, oh no, what am I part of? This has all gone too far. I never realised all this was going to happen. Then they're bound to silence.
Well, let's make an appeal then for any of these people who've signed these ridiculous statements. If you want to come forward and speak to Rich Planet and blow the whistle on what you were told or your role in any terrorist training exercise, please get in touch, because the mainstream media won't publish your story, but we will. Okay. All right, and Nick. Now, do you want to come a little bit more up to date? Because, as I said, the books. Are you going to update it, or is this with these other? It's going to get pretty thick, I would imagine, isn't it?
Well, the main purpose of the book, Richard, isn't to have the very latest stuff. Is to stimulate a European dialogue. We need Europa, that is Europe, to rescue its existence and identity by having citizens talk to each other about the way they're given fictional fake terror. We want to live our lives without constant fear and terror, which the government are feeding us as a non-stop poison, which pollutes all our lives. We want to live in fulfillment and happiness, and we need to kick these people out who are giving us fictional fake terror. They can do their drama rehearsals. We don't want it on the streets of London. And we don't need this endless illusion, what I call the phantom menace. It's very important that George Lucas had that concept, the phantom menace, which is in his great Star Wars film, Episode 1, I think. It is mocked up in order to extinguish the Republic and get oligarch absolute government. The phantom menace is used to take away freedoms from people, and that's the oldest trick in the book, and it's what's been done in a modern context by giving us this endless fictional enemies, events which didn't happen or certainly didn't happen as you're told, and we need the people to be made accountable. And I think that getting a European context for this will help to bring the truth out.
All right, Nick. Well, the book is called A European Perspective, Chronicles of False Flag Terror. So thanks for coming in and discussing it with us, Nick. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure, Richard.
Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.